the best defining factor when it comes to spirituality has always been infinity. The most prominent indicator, in other words, of the spirit is the infinite, which means that the main difference between the physical, the 3D, the ego, and the spirit or spirituality, or anything even that has to do with spirituality, is that the spirit is infinite. The spirit is an everlasting entity or concept which could occupy, opposites simultaneously, because it exists in a timeless dimension. It could be everything and nothing at the same time. And that means if you're seeing the good, if you perceive the good as good and the bad as bad, then it means that your ego is doing the perception, that you are functioning out of your ego. But if you are at a state in which you're able to see the good as bad and see the bad as good, or feel rather the good as neutral and similarly the bad as neutral, it means that your spirit is doing the perception. It's your spirit's perception, and you're functioning in a timeless dimension. And so anything that has to do with the spirit is infinite, is non-dual. You would be experiencing life in a non-dual manner. The spirit does not get recoded or reprogrammed, but simply is coded on top. It builds coding on top of coding on top of coding on top of coding, so on and so forth. And it does not erase any data, it does not lose any information, it does not reincarnate or recreate, but it simply is everlasting. It exists within a dimension that does not differentiate between the present, the future, or the past, but simply is everything and nothing at the same time. However, your ego is, it loses information, it gets reprogrammed and recoded, and you go back and forth because there's a time dimension, and eventually it's reincarnated and recreated, and it loses information, and then it comes into remembrance, all aiding towards our purpose here on life, which we're gonna get to, later on. But for now, we're all aware that within this creation exists, that within existence, that in existence exists an infinite source of pure conscious energy, which gives everything its creation, which gives everything its life, which gives this creation its life, this pure conscious form of energy, this pure conscious energy. And here's where it matters to you, because you might be wondering, what does it matter? What's the point in me knowing about any of this or understanding any of this? And here's where it matters, because when you first have your spiritual awakening, when you first get into spirituality, it would be due to your understanding, due to your mild realization that you're more than just this physical, that you're more than just the 3D. And towards the end of that journey, or when this awakening peaks, in other words, is when you reach enlightenment, is at the point in which you know for a fact that you are this pure conscious energy, and everything in your life is happening accordingly. You are functioning based on this, because if you're living thinking that I am just this physical, or simply my mind is affecting my external reality, or my subconscious is creating my programming, and I'm functioning based on this, because this is all not really a spiritual awakening. This is not what pinpoints your spiritual awakening, because I know you might have heard it, you might have heard other people say that your spiritual awakening is when you realize that you're just a puppet of your mind, you're just a puppet of your subconscious, that you can do, is when you become aware that you can do whatever, that you can transform your life regardless of what's happening externally, that you could go against all odds and make something happen and force something happen, that your mind influences, is when you become aware that your mind, your subconscious could influence your external reality, and so on and so forth, is when you're able to apply discipline and take action against all odds and score a point against all odds, and this is your spiritual awakening. No, I mean, not really. This is not doesn't have to do much with spiritual awakening as much as it has to do with your intellectual awakening. Because I started my journey with my intellectual awakening, but my intellectual awakening, eventually led to my spiritual awakening. I stayed about 3 years, going through my intellectual awakening until eventually I had my spiritual awakening. And my intellectual, what, characterizes your intellectual awakening, to me, it was simply that I was getting into that state in which I was in a constant pursuit of something. I was always trying to absorb as much knowledge externally. I was always experiencing this thrust to know more, to learn more, to research more. And fortunately at that time, I had just moved out to go to university, and I had traveled to a country in which I'm not particularly fond of. And so I got the opportunity. I chose to completely isolate myself and not to interact within this environment. And so I was going to my classes and back to my dorms, and I had all the time to research, and that was my passion. That was what got me excited, because I had, in your intellectual awakening, through your intellectual awakening, you're gonna realize that you were just a byproduct of everything that has been. You are just a byproduct of your upbringing, of your school, of your society, of your parents. And to me, it sort of came with a sense of betrayal, with the sense of what the heck was going on, How could I be living such a big lie? Nothing that's happening within me, nothing that I'm thinking, nothing that's defining me is actually from me, is actually based on me. It was all simply put there through countless of, external factors. And so it really drove me towards pursuing the absolute truth, whatever that was at that point, and it got me into all sorts of, studies, all different fields of studies, from physics to astrophysics to even mathematics, numerology, theology, philosophy, psychology. It got me through all of those, eventually leading me to stuff such as neuroscience and quantum physics and metaphysics. And it gets slower, less and less, the more you get closer to your spiritual awakening. And to me, the breaking point, or rather the turning point, was consciousness. I realized that science, simply because I had removed any supernatural from my equation throughout my intellectual awakening, and I was simply trying to make sense out of life, out of everything or anything, or the truth, without any sense of supernatural or spirituality in the equation. And then consciousness was the thing that led me to reintroduce spirituality in the equation. And then, it took a different turn from there. But my point is that this is your intellectual awakening. Your spiritual awakening is simply when you realize that you are more than this 3D, that you are, and you start on this journey. This awakening kickstarts the journey of you trying to connect further, more and more down the road, with this understanding, with this whatever that you are part of, eventually knowing for a fact that you are pure conscious energy. Now, this begs the question, would it be fair to think of the spirit as the opposite of the ego? Would spirituality be the opposite, the absolute opposite of the ego, or the 3D? And although I've been battling the ego for a very long time, although I've been in a toxic relationship with the ego for a very long time, I'm yet more inclined to say no than yes, for a very good reason. And that's because your journey here is based on the ego. It's meant for you to introduce the ego to the spirit, eventually coming to oneness, eventually understanding through your ego that it is actually the spirit. And that's where we complicate things. That's where we tend to differentiate between things and set this separation between things, only delaying this journey, only procrastinate, only delaying the breakthrough, the enlightenment on this journey, the purpose of this journey, which is collective ascension, which is the collective awakening, which is aiding in the collective ascension. Because the point is coding and recoding the ego to the extent in which it realizes that it's more than simply itself, that it's more than simply survival. And the ego from the beginning of this journey would be completely opposed to such an understanding. And that's why we tend to think of them as opposites. That's why we tend to think of it as ego death when we finally emerge and we're able to reintroduce the ego to the spirit. But it's simply the introduction of the ego to what's beyond. It's not the ego death, it's introducing the ego to your spirit, to the infinite, to its truth, that it's an extension of pure conscious energy, of the infinite source of pure conscious energy. And here's where you experience the true form of enlightenment, true form of spiritual awakening, the peak of your spiritual awakening. And so throughout this journey, you would be on a journey of trying to connect more and more and more to your infinite source. To me, it started the point in which I shifted from having an intellectual awakening and completely coming to an understanding, to the acceptance, to the acknowledgement that I'm more than just this ego, that I'm more than just this 3D. And I started trying to connect. I gradually stopped rather on my pursuit of this knowledge, my thirst for, absorbing as much knowledge as possible externally has gradually steeped, it got lower and lower. And the first thing that I introduced was meditation. And soon after was yoga, not for its stretching or health benefits or, because wellness and health and, taking care of yourself, this is not really part of your spiritual awakening as much as it's part of your intellectual awakening, once again. But rather for its spiritual aspect, the yoga. And the deeper I went into meditation and the deeper I went into my yoga practices, the more I was amazed, the more I was fascinated, and the more it caught my interest. And then it became not just me against the ego that's trying, not my higher awareness that's trying to pursue my spiritual aspect, but rather even my ego got interested in this spiritual aspect. The problem for the ego, the reason it resists, the reason it rejects this concept at first, is because it goes hard against survival. It tells you to remove logic from the equation. It asks you to remove your analysis, your sharp, criticism and judgment and logical aspect and intellectuality out of the equation, and to just rely and to know your truth, to know that you are creating this reality based on your truth, out of your truth, and that you could choose to create it, could choose to give it whatever image, whatever form, based on what is being imprinted, what is being manifested through your higher consciousness by simply being that thing. The ego does not believe in this. The ego believes that it has to struggle, that it has to escape, that it has to work hard, that it has to take actions in order for its survival to enhance, in order to enhance its survival rate, in order to become better, in order to become more prominent, more, successful in this life. Because it's not aware that you could do all of those by simply being, through simply manifesting them through your higher reality, through higher consciousness. And that's why it rejects it and resists it so much at first. But when you come to the point in which you're able to reintroduce it to your higher self, it starts feeling safe in whatever it's doing. It starts knowing that it does not have to rely on survival to feel safe, to enhance its survival, to enhance its living state, but rather it could simply be whatever through this higher state of being. And that's how you attain spirituality. That's how you attain your that's how you peak through your spiritual awakening, through the fact of introducing your ego to your truth, which is pure conscious energy. It's introducing your ego to the spirit, to the infinite. So it wouldn't really be as valid to say that spirituality or the spirit is the opposite of the ego, but simply they are two aspects of the same thing. Each are trying to reach to the same thing, both wanting the same thing. And that's your purpose of creation. That's the purpose of creation. And that's why it's important to understand spirituality, to know what it means to be spiritual, to know what defines the spirit, to know what's the purpose of your spirituality, in which you eventually come to exist in a timeless dimension, be timeless, act timeless. When you're living through this, when you live through this knowing that you are pure conscious energy, you won't be affected by external things, you won't be influenced by your reality, you won't be living through the same as if you just believe that my subconscious affects my external reality, that my mind could influence how things are happening, that I should take action regarding that. I am aware that my discipline, that I need motivation, that I need discipline to take action against all odds, I could create a win out of nothing. This initiative is completely different from this initiative. It wouldn't be the same. You would live in true freedom. You would live uninfluenced, unaffected, unlimited. You would live truly in a timeless manner. You wouldn't let external things dictate how you feel and what you think and what you act and how you react and how you respond. You would rather simply be. And that's basically what I think about spirituality and what I believe the spirit to be. Of course, with many other things, regardless of the infinite dimensions they occupy, and the infinite amount of energy, the infinite knowledge, the infinite everything, the infinity that it lives within, that it embodies, in other words. Simply this is where it really matters to us. Thank you for tuning in to another video by AfsConsciousFrequency. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel, because it helps this video find its way to many more others who might actually need it.